and welcome to The Wardroom, a podcast dedicated to the leadership development of the U.S. Navy's engineering duty officers. I'm your host, Lieutenant Commander Matthew Horton. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Captain Brian Durant, who has been serving for the last year as part of Operation Warp Speed. Captain Durant has almost 29 years of experience as a qualified surface warfare and engineering duty officer, and he has had various assignments across the Combat Systems Enterprise, and most recently served as the Standard Missile 3 Major Program Manager at the Missile Defense Agency. So grab a cup of coffee and join us in the Wardroom. Captain, welcome to the Wardroom.
Hey, thank you, Matthew, and happy to be here.
Yes, sir. So most people listening probably don't know, but you were just a few months away from retirement when you volunteered for Operation Warp Speed. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It was May of last year. I was supposed to retire on September 1st of 2020.
Okay, so I've got to ask, with just a few months remaining before retirement, what motivated you, or better yet, what possessed you to volunteer for what you had to know was going to be a really tough assignment?
All right, so an email came out from Vice Admiral Moran asking for volunteers in the major program management community to assist with the vaccine development. Let's see, that was a Tuesday before Memorial Day. I went ahead and volunteered, and then I wrote to my wife, and I'm like, I can't believe I just did this, but it seems like a good thing. So I was, as you mentioned, the program manager for Standard Missile 3. We were just about to, or had just awarded 2 huge contracts, the multi-year for 1B, which you're very familiar with, and our first real production run for the Block 2A. With all that work done, and we had an ICBM intercept test that was going to be postponed indefinitely, I figured the SM3 team really didn't need my leadership for the last couple of months of my tour. I thought this was a very worthwhile thing to throw my service behind. I had some experience with biosafety level labs when I was down at the Dahlgren Warfare Center as a CO there, so thought that might contribute as well. And let's see, I volunteered on a Tuesday, was notified on a Wednesday that I would report Friday morning. So the Friday before Memorial Day, we were all in here and reported to General Ostrowski, now retired, and to General Perna that Friday, and it's been nonstop ever since.
Well, Captain, I want to say from all of us, thank you for your willingness to serve in this effort. We really do appreciate the work that you guys have been doing there.
You're welcome.
So can you give us a little more background on Warp Speed? You know, what the team was tasked to accomplish, general operating budget, specific authorities, etc.?
I would say, first off, technically, we're no longer Warp Speed. We're now referred to either internally, we call ourselves either the operation, or more generally, we're the federal COVID-19 response. Let's see, a little background. I mentioned it was stood up in May of 2020, and more than once we've talked about building the airplane while you fly it. I've never seen a more true statement than this, how it applies to this job, but it's been absolutely impressive. Obviously, our goal was the pandemic response, and our objective was to accelerate the development, manufacture, and distribution of safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics to the American people. So one of the goals for accelerating that was to manufacture at risks, investing in advanced vaccine production before we even knew that we were going to have a successful vaccine. That's where we took the risk in the manufacturing, knowing that we may have to throw vaccines away if they were not proven safe and effective. As it turned out, we did get through those independent, strict FDA guidelines and then independent reviews by American Committee on Immunization Practices. I believe it is the ACIP. We got through our first one with Pfizer. I believe it was on December 11th, and then Moderna, a small company up in Boston, that a week later had achieved their EUA. So mostly I've been focused on vaccines. We've also gotten EUAs on 3 of our therapeutic treatments. So should you get sick, we now have a way to give you hope that you'll recover and be restored to good health. Let's see, our budget, we're tied to the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. We've obligated about $31 billion for initiatives everywhere from capacity expansion, capacity expansion for manufacturing space, as well as some of the drug fill finishes. You manufacture the drug, you got to put it in the vials. So they're generally done in different locations. So fill finish, you get in the vials, and then you put it off into your freezers and storage. Expansion, development, and testing, and then manufacture of the drugs, substance and drug products, and then distribution, ultimately, safe and effective vaccines and therapeutics. Most of our work has been done through BARDA, Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Agency within Health and Human Services. done a lot of work with JPEO, ChemBio, and Army Contracting Command too, to award and execute contracts.
Wow, so you really do cover the whole of acquisitions. So can I ask what your current role is and what your responsibilities are?
Yeah, so great question. My position has morphed over time. I came in as a program manager, but really it's where is my talent been most needed and useful. One thing that I've been consistently responsible for throughout the program, though, has been Defense Production Act work, the Defense Priority Allocation System, and Health Resource Priority and Allocation System. So most of us as EDs are familiar with DPAS, the Defense Priority Allocation System, at least to those in the MDA world. DPA also allows authority for other departments to have priority rating capability over other other materials besides just defense. The DPA authorities allow the U.S. government to require companies to prioritize our contracts against or above and beyond others. COVID-19 response was clearly critical. It is identified as a national defense response, so it falls under that authority. And that prioritization flows from the primary contracts we have with each of our main suppliers, whether that be vaccine and therapeutic suppliers or some of the suppliers for the equipment and manufacturing space we use. I learned two things as I came on. First, the Department of Commerce owns the DPAS authority. We actually had to request that from Department of Commerce, the ability to exercise DPA or DPAS. There's a slight difference, but ability to exercise DPAS out of Health and Human Services for the Operation Warp Speed efforts. So we got that approval in August. The other thing I would say, we've all heard of, or a lot of the EDs have heard of DPAS. HR Pass, I mentioned the different secretaries have different authorities. HR Pass, Health Resources Priority and Allocation System. If it's a medical resource, a drug, a vaccine, anything that goes into manufacturing drugs and vaccines, PPE, the equipment, that is under the cognizance of Secretary of Health and Human Services, and they have the ability to rate that. For example, we rated most of our vaccines with that, but also needles and syringes and some PPE. We've authorized the use of the DPA and DPAS and HR Pass 19 times since October for vaccine therapeutics manufacturing. Most of my time these days is spent with the ancillary kits. So when you get a vaccine, it's highly likely that that needle that gets put in your arm, I've had some involvement in getting it into that box that we ship out to the administration sites. We've moved hundreds of millions of needles and syringes from across the U.S. and overseas into our kitting sites and have hundreds of million more coming. We have 700 million doses of vaccine, give or take, a little bit less than that we're going to need to administer into the American public. 2 doses, 330 million Americans, just shy of 700 million. So you need all those needles and syringes. You ended up buying a lot of, basically bought out the supply in the U.S. and then bought out a lot of the foreign supply too. And all of it had to be, again, things you learn along the way, FDA 510K and ACIP approved safety needles and syringes. We've also done a lot of training because when you do that, you buy a lot of product from all over the world. You're going to have administration sites, nurses, and pharmacy techs that aren't used to seeing the products that they're going to get in the box. That training that's needed to make sure that they understand what they're getting and how to use it is beneficial. For example, we have what's called a retractable needle. One of our products is a Vantage Point retractable needle, and as a safety measure to ensure there's no post-injection needle sticks or that the needle can't be reused, the needle retracts itself back up into the syringe upon full administration of the vaccine. Just the other day, we had a clinician that wasn't used to seeing that sort of thing and thought they had left the needle in the arm of the patient. So helping to get that training out there and making sure people understand what they're getting has been a big part of my job lately.
What does your typical workday look like, and how would you compare it with maybe your job as the SM3 and PM or some other job you've had before?
So I did touch upon the fact that it's a lot of addressing issues as they arise, and some days I will be getting on the phone with companies to talk to their supply chain and with their suppliers leadership about how we're going to improve delivery dates for critical supplies, whether it be raw materials or specialized single-use equipment for their bioreactors to manufacture vaccines. Sometimes it's running scenarios on, do we have enough needles and syringes if we do this change to how we present the vaccine in the vials. You may all recall the Pfizer 6-dose. The vial originally was filled for 5 doses. We realized with special syringes and needles that have a low dead space, basically the amount of wasted volume, retained vaccine, so to speak, in that syringe, if that's a very small amount, you can actually get more than the prescribed number of doses out of a vial of vaccine because there's a certain amount of overfill. We identified that in late December, and by January, we were outfitting kits to support 6 doses for every Pfizer vial that was going out instead of the 5. So it's those kinds of things where requirements changes on the fly. How do you address them? It's a little bit more real-time and faster moving than any of my experiences in major program managers realm, but all the same basic principles, I guess I would say.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. I would be interested in knowing what leadership tools you brought with you in your EDO toolkit that, you were able to apply during your time there in the operation.
There's a lot of us that are one person deep. We are a very flat organization here. So it's not like I have a team that goes off and does anything for me, and leadership's different in that sense. It's more of the initiative, the self-motivation, the being able to not only see but forecast and predict problems that may arise, and then having contingency plans to address them if they do. Understanding the landscape of what you have available and what you can make available on short notice. Those sorts of things at an accelerated pace. Those are the kinds of things you kind of pick up as a program manager or a project manager to be able to move quickly on changes. This is maybe not leadership, but just good, solid program management expertise and experience have served me well here.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned initiative. So that's one of our targeted attributes this year. And, I'd be interested if you could give us some examples of initiative. What does that mean to you, especially in the context of working the operation there?
A lot of it's just picking up the phone, not being afraid to wade into the fray. If you see something that needs to get done and it's either not getting done or nobody's assigned to it, just picking up the ball and running with it. What was our guidance? As long as it isn't unethical, immoral, or illegal, make it happen. So that's pretty much clear guidance on taking the initiative where you see it needs to be done. I address the understanding, the landscape of what happens with your materials if there's a change to vaccine presentation. And I guess another good example, the needles and syringes that we needed for gaining that 6 dose for Pfizer. A lot of them are coming from overseas, and before we really started expediting materials, pretty much shipping everything by air, we had a number of containers that went via surface ship and were getting hung up in the port of Los Angeles. Not a huge initiative. I mean, it's something I would imagine all of us as engineers or managers, project managers, program managers would do. Okay, who do I need to call at the Port of Los Angeles to make sure that these things are broken free and get on the next train to their destination? It's calling Customs and Border Protection to make sure that the containers are cleared through Customs and Border Protection. It's needles and syringes, so has the FDA approved these to be released as cargo into the United States? Sometimes it's just, go back to the who runs the Port of Los Angeles, who's their operations director, who do I talk to? Keep digging until you find the right person that can say yes to expediting the materials you need expedited. Whether that be needles and syringes sitting in a container in Port of Los Angeles, or it's quite literally moving forklifts from Ireland to Utah so that they can, as specialized equipment, can move heavy machinery into our manufacturing spaces in the right configuration.
Well, I appreciate that discussion, Captain. I think it's one of the things we hear a lot from leadership, making sure that we exercise that initiative. So it's good to hear some specific examples of what that looks like. And I would take that as encouragement for officers maybe on the more junior end, to not be afraid to pick up that phone, to find somebody that can say yes, and to leverage our position as engineering duty officers to get the job done. So it's encouraging to hear that you were able to do a lot of that in your position.
Yeah, I have to say, General Perna has been a remarkable leader. Those words I mentioned as long as it's not unethical, immoral, or illegal, make it happen. He has allowed us to lean forward and take risks that it's refreshing to see. I think his leadership is what enabled us to really do that leaning forward, to take the initiative and get as far as we have, as fast as we have.
So that actually brings up a good point. I guess I would ask, compare and contrast, we'll say the general having your back in that regard and saying, hey, I will support your decision so long as you meet that criteria of not being unethical, immoral, or illegal. How does that compare with maybe some of the other experiences you've had where you didn't have as much as empowerment or knowing that you had as much top cover to get the job done?
So that's a challenging question you're asking me there, Matthew. So I think we're in a different arena than pretty much any program, certainly out in the open, that I've ever worked with or on. We have very clear guidance and we had a very clear deadline. Luckily, we got there and met it. We're still executing to finish the job, but we could call this a war zone or a war type footing. Outside of a war type footing, I don't think the building and the machine allows this kind of rapid action without, significant oversight. And that significant oversight is what I think tends to slow things down and make leadership a little bit more challenged in giving free rein to freedom of movement, so to speak.
No, I appreciate that. And it's actually very relevant as, a lot of the discussions we're having within the community right now are how do we shift to that wartime footing? Particularly as we try to keep up with the shift to great power competition and the speed of competition that we're having with some of our adversaries. So it's good to know that maybe we have an example we can follow as to what some of those unique acquisition authorities look like and the speed to response. You mentioned before that you're kind of an army of one, or we'll even say a navy of one in this case, but do you have any team members working with you or to whom you can reach across as you guys come together as a team? And, what are some of your interactions there?
Yeah, I say the army of one, but really it's a coalition of the willing. We have worked hand in hand since May with some of the actually just amazing scientists with BARDA, the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Agency. They are or have been doing this since December of 19, January of 20, nonstop, 7 days a week, ridiculous days and hours. There's a whole supported and supporting forces. We are definitely supporting them. They are the supported frontline troops. They're the ones figuring out how best to get the vaccines developed. And then we went off and executed the logistics of getting it out in the field downrange. I mentioned the BARDA team, but it's also the strategic national stockpile for gathering up all the gear that we needed to put into the kitting, the alcohol swabs and the face masks and face shields that go to the administrators so they can administer vaccines. And obviously the needles and syringes. It's working with the FDA, very independent organization, but there's different parts of the FDA. The part of the FDA that's doing the vaccine approval, they're looking at the data and saying, yep, safe and efficacious. That's a different part than the part I work with on a fairly regular basis. I mentioned the FDA folks that would clear things through customs, working hand in hand with them. Literally, they and Customs and Border Protection, I give them a call and they are on the ground at the site. If it's an airport that we have stuff coming in, they're at that site waiting for the aircraft to land to get it cleared through. So there are zero delays. It's working with NIH, National Institutes of Health, on making sure they have what they need to get testing done. Other government agencies. I mean, we have a team here, industry and government. We've got U.S. Marshals, we've got FEMA, and clearly all the members of the services. Very first day I reported, it was me and one other program manager, an Army guy, and we looked at each other like we know each other from somewhere. He and I had gone to our PMT 401 class together back in the spring of 2013, I think it was. It is a small world, and making those connections definitely valuable. He and I hadn't seen each other since, but having that background together, and me being the Navy of one here for the longest time. RJ Mikish is the guy, Colonel RJ Mikish, having him help interpret Army speak for me, and that shared past was very helpful and beneficial.
So let me ask you this, shifting a little bit here. Can you tell us maybe some of the dramas that you guys faced? And by that I mean, the highs and lows of working the operation. Was the outcome ever in doubt? I mean, I know you guys talked about how you had to take some risk leaning forward in the production, but was there ever a question of whether or not we'd make it?
I would say the outcome was never really in doubt. To paraphrase Dr. Slough, who was our former science advisor, he was noted as having said we had a 50% chance of getting one vaccine EUA'd by the end of the calendar year 2020. We ended up with 2. Now we're at 3. So I don't think the outcome was ever in doubt. It was really a question of when. We helped to enable something that was never done before. I don't know that I would characterize anything as a drama or a low in all of the work we've done. Even our challenges have been positive in nature. And I'm going to keep coming back to the Pfizer and the low dead space needles and syringes. Depending on how you look at it, it made us change our requirements midstream. But at the end, changing the requirements to get more vaccine out of a vial, basically, we gained an extra dose out of every vial. So every vial is still being filled to the same amount. We gained an extra dose. So that's more vaccines into people's arms faster than it would have been otherwise. So no real lows, no real drama. There's been requirements changes that we have taken in stride and gone ahead and executed. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
Well, it does, and it's good to get that insight. I'm glad the team was able to take what we might consider challenges and really turn them into opportunities. So let me ask you this. You've mentioned the 5 versus 6 doses several times here, but, what are you most proud of during your time at Warp Speed? Is it that, or is there something else that you guys hang your hat on?
I think the team and what we've accomplished here is really the thing I'm most proud of. I mean, holy cow, I can't even express how proud of I am of the men and women that are doing this, from the military services to the public health service, BARDA scientists, as I mentioned, have been working this since the very early days. We've got UPS and FedEx who are in meetings with us every day. McKesson, never knew what McKesson was before, but they are a huge medical product distributor. They are shipping out all of our vaccines and kitting. They're also doing a lot of our kitting. All of the federal partners, DOD, FEMA, VA, Indian Health Services. I mean, everybody's laser focused on our goal and pulling in the same direction. And again, back to General Perna, he's been there leading the way and clearing obstacles for us. That's what I'm proud of is this team and how we've been able to contribute.
So let me ask you this, the flip side of that coin. Is there anything that you wish you could have done differently or do over?
Yeah, short and easy answer, absolutely not. I can't think of a single thing we would do differently, not from my perspective.
So what was the biggest challenge that you faced? I mean, was it overcoming the bureaucratic machine, or did you guys kind of clear the road there? Was there a specific challenge that you can point to and say, hey, that was just really hard to get through?
I was thinking about that real quickly. I was like, I'm not sure that, that the change in requirements is always a challenge, but we're used to that in the Department of Defense too, right? Happens faster here. Warp Speed was an apt name. And when we started, everything does move a lot faster, but maybe the biggest challenge is the figuring out who to talk to and who can say yes, right? Again, not too different from what you experience in a program management or any DoD role. Almost everybody's empowered to say no, right? It's the finding the people who can say yes and finding the people who can make things happen quickly, especially when everybody's on telework.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. That I'm sure that created some unique problems of its own.
Yeah, but once that linkage was made, the team across the board, all the services and agencies, super responsive across anything we needed.
It sounds like you had a lot of good tools in your toolkit that you could bring to this project as an EDO. But let me ask you this. How do you think EDOs could prepare to serve if we ever have another big national project like this in the future?
Great question, Matthew. So I would say, unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of experience in other transaction authority or rapid contracting. Certainly not something a lot of the EDs with my years of experience have had a lot of familiarity with. It's just started to come out in the last handful of years. Certainly would have been very helpful to have that experience. But luckily, Army Contracting Command and Joint Program Office or Program Executive Office for ChemBio was there and had the tools and vehicles in place to go ahead and help us execute. So I would certainly suggest some of the up-and-coming EDs who are interested in program management get that experience, whether it's for preparing for a future national level project or even within your portfolios as regular DoD PMs. Program management, project management, being able to see that big picture and instincts on how to execute a program. And then I mentioned earlier the understanding your what you have at your fingertips, what you have available, and contingency operations for when requirements change. What are you going to do? Having those kind of mental exercises figured out before the actual changes occur. I'm going to apologize in advance. Something Vice Admiral Hill used to say, I'm not going to get it exactly as well as he does. But I remember when he took charge of Missile Defense Agency, he spoke to us as program managers and as other senior leaders and said something to the effect that he wanted us to operate at the edges of our authority. I was really happy to hear that because that's what I've always, hoped to be able to do. I took that to heart when I worked for Admiral Hill in the agency, and now we do that every day here. So being comfortable to understand your authorities and where your guardrails are, and then being able to maybe push those a little bit. Being comfortable in that is I would say critically important if you're going to come onto a job like that.
So that's good homework for us, Captain, especially advice on getting smarter on OTAs. I know there's been a lot of discussion about how we do that. How do we rapidly get capability to the fleet? So that's definitely some good advice, and we'll take it to heart. Okay, so last question I've got for you, and I try to do this with every guest that we have on. So I am eagerly awaiting the recorded history of this time and all the good work that was done there at the operation. But while we are sitting here waiting for those books to come out, do you have any good book recommendations for us in the interim?
So this time last year, maybe at the beginning of May last year, I was reading The Great Influenza by John Barry. Great book to learn about how vaccines were developed, how we came to realizing we could vaccinate, how to learn about pandemics. It's all about, it's called the Spanish flu, but really originated right here in the United States, and our armed services helped spread it all over the world, or that's at least what we believe now. There's a couple other books. The Long Walk by Nelson Mandela. Very interesting book, very impressive. And for those who know me, my running, if you want to talk about pushing internal personal boundaries, your limits of endurance, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and Eat and Run by Scott Jurek.
Well, thank you for those recommendations. I'm really looking forward to adding those to my bookshelf and getting into those. So, hey, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk with us. I want to congratulate you on a long and productive career and on your pending retirement. And hopefully you can go off into retirement knowing that you did some great work for the nation. And again, thank you for everything that you guys have been doing there.
No, thank you for having me, Matthew, and it's been a great ride. Going from the Warfare Center Commander at Dahlgren to Missile Defense Agency and knocking out all those firsts that we did over there, multi-year. And I actually did get to see that first ICBM intercept, by the way. That was pretty astounding. And then to be on a very small, very quick-acting team to get vaccines out to the American people and get us back to normal or some sense of normalcy. Can't be happier.
Thank you for joining us in the wardroom. Special thanks to our sound engineer, Lieutenant Andrew Rowley. If you have questions you would like our guests to answer, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at thewardroompodcast@gmail.com or tweet or follow us at Wardroom Podcast. We look forward to meeting again in the Wardroom.